for joining us today for the Money Happy podcast. We are going to be talking today about how to deal with money stress and financial pressure. I just want to start by giving everyone a little bit of some context, a bit of background to why we've come to talk about this today. So as we know right now, so many of us are dealing with financial stress. Some people are finding it difficult to make ends meet. Some are finding themselves stretched more than ever before. And a lot of us are worried about the future, whether it's short and or long-term financial security. We've got a lot of uncertainty still around interest rate rises, where interest rates are ultimately going to peak and then start to hopefully fall. And our incomes seem to cover less and less as real wages growth is negative, given inflation is still higher than the RBA's target. So around all that, a lot of people are struggling to find secure housing. We've got vacancy rates at all-time lows, and the demand for property, whether you're buying or renting, just seems to continue to increase across all different markets. We've got people rolling off fixed interest rates on mortgage repayments to double what they were paying in the last couple of years. For people who are juggling multiple properties from an investment point of view, they're finding the gap is getting bigger and bigger to close. So what we wanted to talk about today is how can we help people who are feeling the pressure financially with the scarcity that's creeping in day to day, reset, reframe, and approach the unknown with more clarity, more calm, and a little bit of some semblance of a plan. Not necessarily a financial one, but a mindset-focused plan around money and money management. So to help me with this timely conversation about how we can support ourselves to navigate this, I would like to welcome Megan Christie onto the podcast today. Megan is a certified behavioral money mindset coach, and she brings an enormous amount of experience covering or spanning 20 years in her career, having previously worked as an accountant, a financial advisor, and managing a team of advisors in a large organization. Megan and I have known each other for a few years now. And I think it was around the time you were completing further studies towards becoming a certified money coach. And we immediately bonded over the importance of financial well-being. So Megan, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's very much a privilege to be able to be here and talk about this really important and timely topic.
So can we just kick off the conversation and start explaining for us what behavioral and money mindset coaching is?
Yes, definitely, Rebecca. I know when we spoke and met, but 3 years ago now, it was actually probably the time that I first really started to understand the value of what behavioral and mindset coaching could do for people. I actually went through that experience myself. I looked at getting a coach to understand what it meant. And probably the best way I can help explain what mindset and money coaching is to explore how I arrived at that. And it is a relatively new discipline. It can bring a different perspective to how people can get help around money and how they're feeling about money. But it really does start with the history of, firstly, my experience of being a coach now, but also how I was as an advisor previously. So as a certified financial planner, I was helping clients and would understand whether they would have concerns about their money. They often would come in and it would actually be with a sense of panic, fear, overwhelm. Many clients would bring this into the meeting with them, and just probably the best experience I had around it was people who acknowledged that and actually said, I just need help. What do I do? And that would be great if they were ready for advice. Where that wasn't always the case, though, is that they might have recurring patterns or behaviours that was really tripping them up. And when we actually got into their discussions around their money and making decisions and strategies and ultimately products that relate to that, it was sort of became very clear to me that it really had a gap, and a lot of those clients needed additional support. Or they actually might not need advice at that point. They might need to come back and actually have a discussion around their mindset around money, where their beliefs, where their values, what their concerns might be, well before that advice experience. So it is actually very distinct, and it's not advice. It sort of sits in that pre-advice space. But I would often see firsthand just that panic and fear and overwhelm. And I really wanted to understand how can how can I help? It actually isn't dependent on age, profession, education, any income level. I've seen a range of people experience that and struggle with it. And it does have stresses into other impacts into their lives. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk then about what's going on at the moment with finances, the economic uncertainty, and the circumstances that we're all dealing with. We've got a daily cost of living crisis update in the media, constantly waiting every 4 weeks to hear whether the Reserve Bank's going to raise or pause interest rates. We're getting inflation data headlining week to week. It's the first time anybody's really understood what inflation means, I think, for a large part of the Australian population. So we're getting a lot coming at us from a financial perspective. How do you think, or how big of an impact is this having on people at the moment? And how do you see that affecting their feelings and behaviours around money?
really good question. And I think for a lot of people that I've talked to in recent times, it's actually the first time they've ever sort of been in a situation where they might have to actually consciously think about where their money's going, or that the cost of living or bills are coming in and they're more expensive. If they've set their mortgage and that reset is happening, that just what do they do? What does it mean? How do I navigate that? It can really be this sort of sense of overwhelm every time you turn on the news, every time you listen to a story, there's another interest rate going up, or what does it mean? It's just a real sense of unknown, a real sense that it's not in their control. And even if they are feeling okay and they might have okay income and they're overall not in any immediate sense of financial hardship or distress, it doesn't mean that they're not feeling that. And it can really exacerbate things around stress, around a real sense of that unknown, and it can be really unsettling. And our brains actually crave certainty and security. So, let alone that this might be the first time, I'm going to admit my age, I'm in my mid 40s. And I remember when the economy did have its last downturn. I remember when interest rates were higher, and I had that experience having seen that through my own family and my parents. But there's so many people who are sitting here now with potentially mortgages that they've never had that much debt before under these situations. They might have a good job, but they don't know how secure that feels or may be. And it's just navigating that and feeling okay during that time. So
I think it's important for us to distinguish that everyone's feeling a bit of stress. Doesn't matter who you are, what you earn, what job you do, or what your circumstances are personally and professionally. But I think we should probably talk to the fact that there are probably people who are finding themselves in real financial hardship at the moment, immediate financial hardship, and then their course of action or the resources and the support that's available for that scenario are different to maybe the toolkit that one might use where there's not necessarily an immediate financial distress or stress, but there is general level of anxiety, fear, and even to a other degree, we can talk about some other emotions like a bit of shame or guilt about the situation where they're at.
Yeah.
But let's first talk about how would someone who finds themselves in financial hardship, immediate stress, where would they seek help in the situation?
And it's so critical that we make that distinction around those who are in that sense in real financial hardship. It's not a perceived or a sense about it. It's real. And by that, I mean, you might not know where your next bill can be covered with, or you might have a situation where you really are just finding you can't make ends meet and there doesn't feel like there's a lot of options available. The key is to actually know that you are not alone and there is actually always help available in that situation. And that's what we need to normalize around how do we help people seek help and to know that there's absolutely no shame or judgment in doing so. Really having that situation and it's there just keeps compounding the effects of that. So bills left unopened or unread emails, feeling that increased rates when you don't know what that actually means when they come off a fixed rate. And in my experience, holding off and fighting, being able to get help because it is just so overwhelming and scary and people go into that flight or fight response. But often so much could be done by just having that first conversation and just saying, I don't understand, I need help, but I don't know what that could be. And there's a really lot of free resources that are around and available for that. So, first decision to either have that chat with your partner in the first case, just to even admit that to yourself and have that chat is a really good step. But doing that also with those who are really skilled and expert at doing this all the time. They see everything, there's nothing that can surprise people. So, really just lowering that expectation that there is potentially shame or you feel that it's just really difficult to do, give yourself the credit that actually taking that first step may just really set that up. And even Googling the National Debt Helpline or the Small Business Debt Helpline, financial counsellors, they're incredible at what they do and they really help people navigate either debt, buy now, pay later, compounding situations that they just don't see a way out. So you can contact them. Are really free, independent, experienced, complex situations they can help navigate. For the other people who might not be in that immediate crisis situation, you actually could contact your bank, your super fund. They all have hardship departments, especially in terms of having your needs met. Bills, you can contact your bill providers and they can actually have terms that they might work through with you around hardship. So there is a lot of steps for those who are vulnerable and feeling like that. Now, there is also additional support around mental health services, and I really encourage anyone to always seek that help because such in time and feeling that you actually do have options can really give you that sense of control and that a little bit more peace of mind and know that you actually can do things. It's not overwhelming to that degree. Now, in terms of that, there's other organisations obviously around that. So Lifeline and Headspace, Beyond Blue, they also have business support. So really do seek that out. And just a quick Google can really show where those services can be. And food services are available as well. So know that you're not alone and that help's available.
Yeah, there is a lot of help out there. I think it's not, honestly, I don't think it it could be better discussed to the majority of the population. And I think it's on a needs basis. We've had a very good economic climate up until very recently in the last several years, and it's been easier for people to cruise a little bit with their finances. And I think now we're facing tougher economic conditions and climates, and that's having an impact on some of our biggest expenses like housing and also a greater number of our expenses through our cost of living. So we're feeling it everywhere. But I think that leads into my next sort of like discussion point. It's that, and the reason that I bring this up is that I've even felt it myself and people or professionals that I've spoken to who work in this space. We have a general awareness of our own money mindset when it comes to how we're thinking and feeling about money because of what we do. And I know myself and through conversations with others in the last or this year, let's say, that there have been times where we found ourselves starting to slip into a bit of a scarcity mindset around money. I'll let you explain that because you'll do a much better job of it. But it's for people who aren't aware of what that is and how you can, not necessarily the danger, but the impact that it can have on how you feel about money, the decisions that you make in the moment and in the next 6 to 12 months about money. I think it's important for everyone to sort of understand what it is, recognize if it's at play and how it may be starting to influence their financial decision making for the worse as opposed to the better. So can you just talk to us about what is a scarcity mindset and how does it show up in your financial decision making?
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So when you're not in that immediate financial hardship, it doesn't mean that you're not feeling that general worry and that stress that something could happen. I mean, the many clients that I've spoken to, especially women, feel like, oh, I might be that whole worry about turning up and not having anything and having to live in your car. Like that is a really genuine, real worry is actually the case for many people who might be finding themselves in that situation. And it's actually something that feeling good about where you are in your situation. Money is one of the really last great taboos, I think. Like in a recent survey, concerns about money and paying bills was quoted as the top source of stress, and 2/3 of Australians surveyed felt that that was it, above anything else that was going on in their world. And that also has shown that research has shown that people feel actually more comfortable talking about debt and sex than they do about money. And that says a lot as well, because there's a lot of hidden emotion around money. There's a lot of just understanding of generational impacts around money, stories that have happened. And I think that all can layer. So it can be really complex for how people actually perceive the money stress that they might be experiencing or feeling, but also how that then can play out and how they behave around money and the important things when they're making decisions around money. So really common money block that actually comes up, and you mentioned it, is around scarcity mindset. It also is known as like a poverty mindset. And that's essentially where people are operating from a real place of fear. So they've experienced either that genuine poverty growing up, or they've actually come to connect and internalize a sense of missing out or never having enough. Now, even within family environments that there's more than one sibling and you might have grown up with the same parents and same money experience in a lot of respects, each sibling can actually have different money behaviors and experience money differently and feel completely from one end to the other around feeling quite abundant and able to live with a sense of calm around money, to feeling very fear-based and scared and just don't know where to turn, and just it's overwhelming. And there's no rhyme or reason as to why that has such an impact for some people and not for others, but it really is that degree where their survival instinct is kicking in and that underlying belief. And there's a lot of conditioning that comes in around money. So the broader money culture, society saying you need X, Y, and Z to be a success, or you need X income to feel wealthy or to feel safe. And our identities get tightly wound up in that. So actually can play out later to a large degree unconsciously, because you might not have that sort of reaction until something like a financial stress happens or a life event happens. And this can just come up and emotionally you're reacting. And I think that can have other things that happen. So someone with that poverty mindset or scarcity mindset can really hold on to their money overly cautiously or overly and protect, because they're so fearful of not having it. Or they can be the complete opposite and never want to feel like that. So they spend beyond their means to feel safe. So it's actually feeling an emotional response to that kind of fear, that base level of fear and survival instinct that all of us experience at different times. Our attitudes and behaviors are really heavily influenced by what we need to do to feel safe. So, and that's what I was saying, it can be different for everyone. So conflicted emotions around money happen a lot. Again, because is it a want? Is it a need? Is it a necessity? Because everyone's getting a house. And if I don't have this kind of house, then I'm not a success. Is it a status symbol because I feel better? Because I'm clearly doing well in life. And it's all these measures of how we self-measure, but also what society and our conditioning and how we take that on board can interact. So that sense of we don't have enough can also then attach to identity to equate to I'm not enough. So a lot of situations happen, especially when financial hardship or financial stress can play in, where your net worth and who you are as a person starts to really feel affected because of your situation with your self-worth, because of your net worth impact. So key is your bank balance changes, just like the weather, it can change. And we might not be in control of that. We might be in control of it, but we might have debt. But what happens is our worth is not dependent on that. And it really is important to help be aware of that in upfront. And then it's about taking a different path. So you can explain to yourself or expand on that and sort of say, look, I don't want to admit it. I hide away from it. I might spend because it makes me feel immediately better. I get that dopamine hit. I feel a sense of reward. And then I'm back feeling guilty. And then I can't get out of debt. So I feel shame. And then I can't tell my partner about it. And then, so there's all this flow on. And biggest source of relationship stress is around money and relationship breakdown. And there's many other things, health impacts, well-being impacts, as Rebecca, and the work you're doing really does have a holistic impact around and flow on for people. So you can actually, through some examples about how to help yourself just be mindful of that and how to catch yourself in the moment. We can do that now, Rebecca, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we move into the practical side, I just want to sort of catch everyone up to sort of where we're at with the relevance to the everyday that they're having at the moment. So, I mean, what you said is so true. We're talking about to deal with money stress and pressure. And so we've really sort of gone down and covered two scenarios. One where there's a real immediate financial hardship. There's a real tangible objective shortfall in income, let's say, to meet expenses in the situation. And then there are lots of resources to help deal with the practical side of that financial hardship. And we covered some of those. And then there's this self-awareness, I guess, that you've spoken about that we need to sort of explore a little bit in order to understand or help us move through pressure and stress, or dealing with the pressure and stress, whether it's an immediate real hardship or it's a perceived or potential hardship that we're fearful of in the near future based on what's happening. And I think you're going to go through how someone can deal with that pressure and stress, the mental pressure and stress, as opposed to the practical side of dealing with that. And you made a really good point, which I think is worth repeating at this point as well. And that is that what is the emotion driving the pressure and stress? Are we worried that and the pressure and stress is bills, constant bills piling up, the continual contraction in terms of what's left every month at the moment. We're paying out here, there, everywhere. Every time we turn around, there's a new bill and it's gone up from last month. Or we had periods where it just feels like every bill that we could possibly funding in an entire year's arrived this month. And we see this complete outflow from the bank account. And oh my God, that pressure of like, how am I going to recoup? And is this going to continue? And to what end? And where will it end? So that's a real kind of, we're feeling real emotions. We're feeling maybe fear. We're feeling anxiety, we're feeling stress. And I think if we dig into why we feel that way, well, it's pretty obvious in the immediate answer is, well, I don't want to get taxed for everything that I have. I don't want to burn through all of my savings. I don't want to see everything that I've worked for to pile up over, create the nest egg that I've got disappear. I think those are real fears, but then to really move through and deal with those as a practical side, in the sense that, well, what can we do on the money management, the financial management side to stem the flow, to create additional income, to reduce expenses, to restructure our finances so that we're in a better financial position to weather the storms or the difficult periods. But we also need to really, like you said, address the emotional side of why that is, or how we're letting that affect us. Because if we're fearful, why are we fearful? We're fearful because there could be a real shortage, or are we also beating ourselves up a bit here, which could be preventing us from doing more or getting more help because we have a certain type of job and therefore we shouldn't need to ask for help because we should know these things. Or we earn a certain income. So how could we have found ourselves in this position, earning that much money? How are we a certain type of person? I'm sensible. I'm proactive. I'm practical. I'm conservative. I've always done the right thing. I've always followed the rules. I've always made the right decisions. So how can I be in this position and so who's completely reckless and never done the right thing ever and finds themselves fine? So I think there's lots of stories that we're telling ourselves in these moments too about how we define, how we're attaching our own identity to our financial decision making and our money and our wealth. And that's the point you are making about we need to recognize to what degree we're attaching our self-worth to our financial worth. And if it's to a large degree, that creates a bigger problem from a mindset perspective, because we've got to really work at detaching that in order to reduce the stress and pressure about the situation. Also, do the things that we need to do to help get out of the situation. So can you talk us through some of those examples? Like, how can we work through this?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I'm going to probably layer it a little bit just to start full, and I can work through. So at the highest level, that sense of just stress and overwhelm and anxiety around what's uncertain around you, that underlying conditioning I was talking about, those money stories, those generational money stories, how your parents talked about money, we actually absorb so much in those early years. Like it's around behavior. A lot of that is the early formation years of our lives that we're just we're absorbing that like sponges and then subconsciously parking it. And we might not be aware of how that then can impact us later. It might not come up until there is a stress or a similar situation happens that you might have recalled. Or, yeah, it's something that makes you confront how you are feeling about it. And it can bubble up. And even within relationships, this is where a lot of tensions can happen. But even just within your own personal self, knowing yourself is one of the best skills that we can learn and develop. And I think just catching ourselves and being aware of that, you can walk through life motivated by a number of things, whether that's external, whether that's status, whether it's that conditioning, whether it's your own internal measures, and how we then navigate how that comes up. So someone loses a job. I'll just walk through an example. So we've got a situation that we've built in our life around maybe we've got a family, maybe we've got a partner, we've got a plan around what income we'd like to have, we've got a view of the way we would like to live our lifestyle. And a lot of people find this, the first 10 years that they're earning money, they're incrementally increasing their salary and they might get to a plateau, but that first 10 years they might also spend and eat that up. So as they're increasing income, they're not feeling any better off or any in that sense of I've got assets behind me. I know what I can do. I know that I've got this backing me. If something was to really happen, I've got an emergency fund sitting there that can just help buffer even for a little while until I get a new job. So a lot of steps can happen to put in the right structure around how you operate with money. And some of that can be done through cash flow and good structure and good habits. Some of it is when you need to go and see an advisor. So that's where there's that pre-advice money management part of it and behavioral part of it. And then I need to go and see an advisor to get that next help, or you might feel comfortable doing it yourself. But when we come back to why am I feeling this? I've got this view, I've just lost my job. Now, you might be someone who you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're like, oh, right, I'm really in that hardship place. You might be someone who goes, I can manage for 6 weeks. I can manage for 2 months. I've got 6 months worth of savings I could manage. Worst case, you could go and then think differently about that. But it doesn't mean that you're feeling any less stressed about it. You also might actually, in some respects, there might be redundancy. There might be other things that come with it that can help buffer as well. So that can help alleviate some of that immediate concern around what do I do? But when we come back to actually how we feel about it, it's such a personal experience. And that part of it is what coaching and behavioral mindset work can really help with. And a lot of that is how we've connected ourselves to it. So if we were to always stay in our heads about things and react emotionally, so over 90% of our decisions are emotional. And people think they're being really rational when they're making money decisions. They're like, okay, I understand this, or I make this trade-off. It's rational. It's very rarely rational. It is, unless you're very aware of how you're reacting and how you have come to that decision and really know yourself really well, then it can more often than not be an emotional reaction or an emotion-led decision. And it's just that initial mindset of, I need to be aware. So the key is to get out of your head. And it's actually quite a physical, a body. I'm just going to work through this experience quickly, and then I'll walk through the bigger context of maybe losing that job and what you could do and how it could apply. But just that initial feeling really overwhelmed here. Like, how do I get out of this just immediate overwhelm? You might speak to someone. You might just jot down your ideas and journal. You might sit there and actually just take some breaths, and really even standing and just jumping on your soles of your feet can trigger your body to kick in and get you out of your mind, out of your head. Now, you actually can do that in public and in meetings, and it can be done very subtly. I've done it many times where I've just gently bounced on my feet and shook my arms. And just that gets me out of my thinking brain about it and worry into, okay, I'm back here now. Let's get back into my body. Let's trust myself. Let's find out what I'm experiencing here. And that's where the sense of safety. So you can get out, once you've done that, it's really 3 quick questions that can really help you move through the mindset shift. And it actually includes owning what you're really worried about. So actually naming it. So what is it I'm really worried about? That's the first question. I'm losing my job. That means I'm moving out of home. That means I've got to sell my house. I might have to get my kids out of private school. I don't know. It's just flooded.
Yeah. And can I just say that's probably where most people stop, because they that is so a fear. That's such a fear,
Yeah.
whatever the answer to those questions are.
Yeah.
That they don't want to think about it.
And some might not even want to ask themselves the question because it's just too confusing.
That's exactly right. And let alone talk about it with a partner. Because then you've got two sets of fears and the other part. It's like it's complicated. So go on.
And then once you've really questioned yourself about that and been brave to admit it to yourself, you don't have to yet admit it to your partner, but to yourself. And then what might help you feel less worried. So you're moving into what might happen or what could happen. So you've come from the reality and the overwhelming feel into starting to move into what would help me feel less worried about this. And that's really important because that safety, that sense of safety, that's what I was saying, it can mean different things to different people. You might actually need to take steps for you to make you feel okay. Now, I know there's context around people who, if they don't have a house, they just feel all at sea and they feel like they've been a complete failure in life and they feel that that is just the worst thing that can ever happen. Now, when they've then explored that and we've gone, well, what is it that you're really worried about? They're like, well, just that sense of shame. And I can't admit that to my family. Like I've just got so much cultural shame around that. And if I lose my house, then I'm just a failure. That's then affected their identity. Okay, so what might help you feel less worried about that? And that's where, okay, well, I can contact the school and ask about school fees because I've lost my job. I can contact the bank and say, look, this has happened. What are my options right now? I can contact the bill providers and understand, okay, this has happened. Now, you might be okay because you might have that buffer there initially, but doesn't mean the worry. So this exercise can happen at any point. You can do this multiple times and keep testing yourself. And then what options are available to me right here and now? And that's those questions. So just one simple act can start to relieve that sense of overwhelm, worry. Now, it might not mean you have a solution, but it means you're taking action and getting back that sense of, you're not in that sense of helplessness, you're actually helping yourself.
Yeah, I was going to say, can I ask, is that really is this process also important, not just because it's moving you towards an actual outcome in some way, but it's also empowering you, which is a part of the psychological battle here, because you're no longer operating from this is all happening to me and I'm now going to take agency over the situation and work through and change about it.
Very much. Because you've worked from I'm tied up in this in entity or this identity about it to that's causing possibly that sense of overwhelm to then, okay, can sort of see what I could do. I might not have the answers, but I could see what I could do. And then as soon as you take action and you commit to it, that changes the game. That's the mindset shift. You've gone from this is happening to me to I don't know the answers, but I know I can do one thing. And what's that next one thing? I can do this. And it's immediate, that shift into I am now going to be able to take steps to help me feel okay. And again, you might not have all the answers. It might not solve the situation, but just the fact that you've done that and committed to that, that's the ability for you to take back that control. And I think, that particularly that sense of it's not happening to me and there is options. But I think the other thing around this is just that overall pattern of ruminating. It can happen where you go into a pattern and it keeps you awake at night, keeps waking you up. That's when there is a bigger thing at play here and you do need to seek some additional support, whether that is around mental health support or really you feel like you really can't get this. That's when a coach can work through a longer term behavioural habits and change to get that change in longer term thinking, or an advisor if you've got that relationship, financial counsellor. Like you can, wherever you're at, you can get some help. But the main thing is if you have to sell your house, if you have to take your kids out of private school, that might feel like the most embarrassing, hardest experience and you've fallen on hard times and you're a complete failure. But is it really? Is it really? Like when you look at what you've got, this is where this sense of certainty and safety It's about rebalancing that perspective and bringing awareness to it, and then bringing that sense of, well, you do have support. You do have amazing things in your life. You were someone before you had your house and your kids went to private school. You'll be someone after, if that's the worst case scenario. So it's then shifting, just not minimizing it in a superficial way, but helping yourself not feel that it is all or nothing, or just that sense of
Returning is
balance.
valuable bit too, like returning to your sleeves at that time, right? It's a good time to recalibrate, like what's okay. Yes, those things I always saw them as a goal or as something that I wanted to be able to do or provide for, or if I ever found myself in a financial position to do so or had the means to back it up. But do you think it's also worth, like at this point, sort of shifting the view sometimes? I think when it comes to financial well-being, we attach it to like some kind of linear trajectory that we're all on. Like it's onwards and upwards, goes in one direction. I think that's really dangerous as a viewpoint on financial well-being in particular, because just as you said, there are so many things that can impact our financial well-being that are beyond our control as well, like pandemics, job losses, health events, accidents,
relationship breakdowns,
natural disasters. You could have like the floods that came through in Queensland beginning of last year. Like you just woke up one morning and half your house was underwater. It's like, oh, okay, that's a big problem. I think if we start to say, well, some of our success and well-being, yes, it comes down to personal responsibility too. This is the same for mental health and also for physical health, but there is an element that's beyond our control. I think if we see well-being as this slider or this continuum where sometimes we'll be here, sometimes we'll be there, sometimes we'll be back up way past where we started, which is great. But as long as we, using what you've just sort of started to take us through, see that the steps to taking control over the situation, we can move ourselves through those stages, which is just important, I think, to say, because people see it as a scorecard. Well, I'm here and now I'm here, and I attach XYZ feelings to that. But really, if we get a bit more flexible with our mindset, there's a lot of value in that too.
Yeah. I think you're spot on in the flexibility place, but for a lot of people that just they're in so much shock and so much to process that they actually, without that support, they can't do that themselves. And it is, the framework is really meaningful and sustainable change of any kind takes work, and it takes awareness, and it takes understanding patterns of reaction and behavior, identifying there can be a real clash with your core identity and feeling vulnerable and shame and guilt and all of that. And then how you actually can shift that to more resilient, constructive identity around it, which is, okay, this has happened. How can I do just one extra thing and one extra thing and one extra thing? And before you know it, you're looking back going, look how far I've come. Now, that's also the case before you might have had this incident happen or feel this with your finances, because again, talking back early in your career, like that first 10 years of your career really can set people up, or they might feel like they've not got anywhere and they're just treading wheels. And that wake up moment can happen at any point. It's never too late to have that. But the context is you've actually, if you looked back and saw how far you've come and actually considered, wow, look what I've achieved. Even though I'm in this situation right now, look what I've achieved. If I was 5 years ago, look how far I would be still really grateful of where I am right now. And it's really easy to forget that and to find that your fears will overrun that, or your emotions can overrun that. And so when I'm saying be brave and really ask yourself what's the worst that can happen, that's really owning it and really specifically saying it. But then you go that flight and fight fawn response that can compound the situation. So then you're reacting and making decisions that might make it worse, or you're actually then just operating in default mode rather than thinking, is this the best thing? Am I aligned with what really matters to me? And this is the whole coaching experience when you go through it. And it takes 90 days for a reason, because we work through that with clients. But there's other ways, this shorthand way that I'm talking to, people can do this regularly themselves. if they're feeling that sense of light anxiety or lighter stress. And then try and catch yourself, go into that space where you go, right, I'm back in my body. Now I ask these questions. How do I help myself feel less worried? And then what's possible? So you can get practical. You can then go, right, I know I haven't opened all my bills, but I'm going to look at them. Where am I at? Like, what's coming in? What's going out? What's critical and urgent? What can I delay? Even things like I've got my dentist appointment coming up this month. What am I going to do? I'll just have to cancel that. But you can actually, instead of feeling like that's the worst thing for your kids or you to delay, you actually could go, well, hang on, I think we're good. I'm going to keep on flossing and cleaning and really paying attention and focus on that. Means I will not feel bad about doing that for another 5 months until I can get there and we can sort out what's going on with the job loss. So it is just that give and take. It's the flexibility about it, but you do have to get real about it at some point and get brave and be okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
And then the last thing around implementing this is what can you act on? So that next best action. So I can contact the school, I can contact the bank, I can contact the bill providers. Maybe I've got that extra money. Maybe I can ask family. I can speak to my friends and say, look, we're a bit short right now. Can, be great to let's think of differently about maybe how we're catching up. So I can speak to a financial counselor. I can my CV ready. There's so many practical things that you can do. But lastly, and this is the really sense of key, is that sense of joy and abundance and gratitude about where you are right now and knowing that small steps matter and it's not necessarily about your wealth. Does not equate to your net wealth, does not equate to your self-worth. And just anything that you can do to find that small step to say, I'm not in a sense of helplessness here, really can help. And just, I have a plan. And that's where just that one committed decision to go, I'm going to take this step and work through this, it will change the whole trajectory after that. And I know, I've had an experience again recently with friends who did lose their job. One of the partners did lose their job and they were like really open about telling it. And I said, do you know what? Well done you, because not many people are so open about that with their peer group, or they just might hold on to that and not share it. And they said, yeah, things are a little tight. We still want to keep catching up with you, but can we all just maybe we do rotating dinner parties and everyone brings a plate? Straight away, that just took the pressure out of it because they were open about it. And it gave everyone permission to support them and actually go, yeah, we'll do that. Okay, we'll host this time, everyone bring a plate, And I think just the little things, you might even go, okay, I feel like I'm missing out again, or I feel like I can't do this or I can't do that. And putting yourself into a financial position that you're spending money where you might not have it. But instead of going and filling your cup up with your friends and catching up and going to a movie, a gold class movie, for example, or whatever you go and see Barbie, that might time date this Rebecca for you, but go and have a walk on the beach with your friends and have an ice cream. So you can still fill your cup up, meet that sense of, the word is abundance, but it's that mindset about I'm actually okay. I can feel okay about this without necessarily feeling like I'm missing out.
Yeah, that's so true, because I think, and to add to that, I think seeing the situation as circumstance, okay, moment in time, right now, this is where I'm at. And this is what the situation looks like. It is what it is. And like you said, being brave and that, and just looking at how the chips have fallen, how the situation looks in the stark light of day right now, once you can get to that stage. But also accepting that it's not your current situation does not define you as well. It's a bit like, and I think sometimes seeing that concept in other areas of our life and well-being is really helps bring the flexibility back to financial well-being. Because, if you look at people who are in business, for example, they start somewhere relative to someone else's journey, and it's a massive grind, or it's a massive slog. It's hard work. It's a lot of cheap cost of living is low, income is low, base is low, and then they may even fail a few times along the way too, to use that word. But it's okay in the context of business and commerce. It's acceptable. It's actually revered, it's part of the journey, the experience. I'm not saying that should be the same in a personal financial sense, but I'm just saying in the sense that Everything is just a moment in time. We're on a journey. It's our own journey. And it may be smooth sailing for you. It may be up and down constantly. It may be peaks and troughs. It may be an average kind of climb. But whatever it looks like, I think knowing that there's help, there's resources, there's people who work in these fields like yourselves that can provide advice, guidance, support to help move you from one stage or to another. But in any which way you look at it, it does start with, as you said, being brave, looking at the situation, and then asking yourself that terrible question that nobody wants to answer, but well, what's the worst that can happen? As soon as you own the worst case scenario,
it's not the worst, and it starts to lift.
You sort of ditch the pressure and the stress because you've stared the reality in the face, and maybe you can even find some levity in the next steps or something. But I'm not saying that and I don't mean to reduce the difficulty that anybody finds themselves in, because everybody's been there in certain circumstances.
Everyone has been there. Everyone has felt fear sometimes.
Everyone feels fear. Everyone feels anxiety.
Even if you have more money, that doesn't necessarily go away.
Yeah, that's right.
No, not at all. And sometimes the problems become bigger problems. So it is all relative, and it is really around just, owning it, but understanding where you are when you're reacting and that you can catch yourself. That I think that's probably the real key to this at the start of that whole process, is not just to be in default, emotionally reacting, going, okay, it's okay to feel like this. It's okay to feel really shit about this, to be honest. And it's normal and it's okay. But now let's what can I do about it? And it could take a little while to get there. And you might need someone to help walk with you as you do that. And everyone's going to have different needs around that as well.
So one thing that you'd love people to take away from our conversation today?
Well, very honest for me is, that's okay. Well, for me, it's just talking about money. Let's get out there. Let's get rid of this whole shame around it and this taboo, and that you're not alone about it. When was the last time you had a real conversation about money? When did you have that with your spouse? When did you have that with your friends? I mean, I've got friends, and this is why I became an advisor, but now why I'm no longer an advisor and a coach, is because it's this real nugget of it, is that people need others around them to make this feel normal as well.
Yeah, so the whole space for the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's just start talking about it.
Yeah.
Enough on other people's money stories. That's what I say.
Yeah, I think from a cultural perspective, the biggest way we tend to talk about money is on the academic level. Generally, we all talk about how it works and
facts, the numbers,
strategies, and so we talk about it in an academic way, and therefore we kind of attach a meaning to how we should talk about money. It's about being smart. It's about being intelligent. It's only for numbers people. And I think we also talk about money maybe more casually, where we share our relative successes,
Always the successes, never the loss ups, or the fuck ups, as I say.
$5 billion. Well, we're amazing.
I want to have a catch up with your mates and actually share the fuck ups that you've had around money.
That's
it's very freeing.
Yeah, the actual bad decisions. I failed here. I made a boo-boo. And everyone's got them. Nobody, even people who work in finance. I mean, we've all made mistakes or taken punts on things or gone a bit too much, a bit too hard on something. And we've made what we thought were good decisions, and on paper were good decisions. But a pandemic potentially could have who expected a pandemic? Nobody. We all expect them now. But they were never part of our decision-making framework before. So look at all the people that bought businesses or something just before lockdowns happened. Nobody thought we never had no reference point for a lockdown and the impact that could have on a business or finances. So, I mean, to be ashamed or to be embarrassed, which is of course, a natural
Natural.
instinctive reaction to those kinds of failings on the business side is normal, but for heaven's sake, it is not warranted. Like, you need to give yourself a break on that one.
And you make a very good point about people put others up on a pedestal about what they're doing. Like, they must have gone to that class that taught me about money, and I missed that class.
Yes.
Like, do you know, probably upwards of 80% of people I've ever met around this would feel the same way, but no one else thinks that anyone else is feeling that. And even as a professional, I mean, the value around getting support and exploring your own money story, exploring your own money beliefs, your habits. Why do you think this way about money? And really writing it out and actually working through it is invaluable. I mean, I've gone through that experience, and even with all the knowledge I have, it doesn't mean that it's like two sides of a coin. You've got the external and you've got the internal, and it's connecting those two that really matters to making this really sing for you in your life. You know, how you build your relationship around money and how you act, and ultimately what is success for you. And I think everyone, advisors, accountants, would benefit from actually going to have a coaching experience and helping unpacking their own money stories, because that will in turn allow better understanding and empathy for their clients as well.
Yeah, I think that's just a really interesting point, actually. We could do a whole topic on that. Maybe we should, but
We could.
I think there's this real great expectation, to everyone's relative detriment, really, that people who work in numbers-based professions, or even in analytical professions, engineering or things like that, that they somehow are just naturally good with money, or that they are guaranteed in some way to be or feel financially well or successful because they can add up numbers well, and they do that on a daily basis. And even as qualified financial advisors, just because you know something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll do it, or that you'll make the right decision at the right time.
No.
Or that you'll even if you have those two things, throw in another person who thinks completely differently about money, and you're on a life's journey together in a relationship. Well, that can mean the thing goes total opposite way anyway. So it's it's really interesting that assumption around people who work for a bank, or people who work for an accounting or consulting company, who work in engineering, who work in data analytics, they don't need help with money. They've got it sorted. I mean, we know plenty of advice, and we've just admitted ourselves, you know, as advisors, you have to go through this process constantly and work out your money mindset and how it's showing up for you and how it's influencing your decision making, your ability to communicate what you really want with people and yourself. And so
I call it the light bulb moment. When do you have your light bulb moment? Because we all bring our own biases, our own beliefs, our own experiences, our own journey. And that, whether it's professionally or personally, people, doesn't mean that they act on what they think they should be doing. That's where that can trip up, and those habitual patterns can trip you up. And I know myself, I got into debt when I was traveling in my early 20s, and then met my husband, my now husband, and was like, I can't tell him that I'm in debt. Like, there was so much shame about that. And when I realized that I had to work through that myself, and I've never looked back, and we've never looked back, because we then went, okay, let's put a plan in place. And I think everyone will have a story that they've experienced that level of financial stress and trauma about it, and not knowing how to do it. But once you have that moment and you go, okay, that didn't feel as bad as I thought it would feel.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's probably the thing that I'd love to leave on, is let's just start talking about money. And I like that idea of actually getting together and sharing our thoughts around money. You might have to bleep me out, Rebecca.
So let's talk about that afterwards. But look, thank you so much for joining me today to talk to everyone around this topic, how to deal with financial stress and pressure. It's an ongoing battle for everyone. You know, even when times aren't difficult economically, we all have struggles through life's natural course and journey. So it's a timeless topic, and just thank you so much for contributing today.
Thank you, Rebecca.